Welcome to Women in Leadership Talk, where you'll hear from successful women who are empowering other women with their stories of adversity, resiliency, and success. And here is your host, Vicki Bradley, founder and CEO of Women in Leadership Empowered.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thank you so much for joining in today. I hope you're outside getting some fresh air, maybe taking the dog for a walk as you're listening to this episode. We have a lot to talk about today, and I think some of you will recognize some of the symptoms and some of the things that we're gonna be referring to today. But I wanted to welcome you, and as you know, take just a couple of seconds, subscribe to us. Give us a review. Let us know what you think of the podcast. We're always interested to hear, what our audience is thinking. And that's why we're here, is to bring you great stories and introduce you to incredible individuals. So let me take a moment here. I want to introduce Jossie Haines. Jossie, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Awesome. Well, we're thrilled to have you here. And let's just jump in. I'm going to give you, our audience, a little bit of context as to why I invited you to the show. Jossie has 25 plus years in engineering leadership, including leading the Emmy-winning Siri media team at Apple. She served as VP of engineering at Tile and building products for over 100 million users. She understands the realities of engineering leadership because she lived them at scale. So I'm excited to get in here and just, really start talking about what that was like for you. And, I think when I kick us off here, I think a lot of our audience can relate to this. But one of the things you had shared with me that was when you stopped getting emails at 10 and 11 p.m., your first instinct was you must be being excluded or taken out. So what did that feel like, number one? And what made you think that you were being excluded?
So when I was at Apple, I was there for 2 years. I ran the Siri media team, which you already mentioned, which was Siri on Apple TV. And I also ran the Siri music team during the HomePod launch. So we built over 30 new features for Siri music. And there was this unspoken expectation that the engineering managers and the TPMs would work around 9 to 11 or 10 to midnight. And nobody said it explicitly that this was an expectation. But if you didn't do it, you'd wake up to hundreds of emails. And you also just had people kind of looking at you like, oh, you're not really committed to this. And by the time I left Apple in early 2018, I was going through a lot of imposter syndrome. I actually thought I was a terrible manager, despite the fact that I had people say as I was leaving Apple that I was the best manager they'd ever had. And so when I started my next role at Tile, there was two things that happened. One was I wasn't getting emails at night. And my first reaction was actually not relief. It was panic.
I was going to say anxiety.
Yeah, it was this anxiety. Am I being left out? Do they not trust me? And then there was a second part to it, which was the first thing I was assigned to work on, because I was working part-time when I started, because I was like, I'm inching back into this tech thing after my Apple experience. And I was asked to fix a memory leak, which was a bug. And the team had been struggling with it for a while. And my first week, it was Friday afternoon, and I hadn't solved the bug. And I was genuinely convinced that I was going to get fired.
Wow.
And because I didn't fix it in my first week. And I fixed it at about a week and a half later. And everyone was honestly thrilled that I fixed it. And they were like, oh my gosh, how did you figure it out? But like my nervous system did not realize it was okay. And the real thing I really learned from that is I think we often tie burnout with exhaustion. And there is. It's almost this like, I can't do anything when you're feeling burnt out. And also imposter syndrome can trigger that too.
Of course.
But it also is this rewiring of like threat detection. You start even interpreting what should be a normal, healthy work environment as danger.
Yeah.
And that's been really interesting because I've now seen this pattern show up as well in some of the folks that I coach.
Okay. Well, fight or flight is very real.
Yep.
right? And we're living in a society today that everything is highly reactionary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that, to your point with the nervous system, your nervous system goes on this hypervigilance of where's the next threat coming from,
Yep.
right? And that is exhausting. I mean, of course we're going to experience burnout if that's happening over and over and over. So what were some of the things that you did, Jossie, to sort of quieten the fight or flight?
So first, the one thing that was wonderful is it was a positive environment. So I got reinforcement of the good behavior, right? And, I had people praising me for the work I was doing. I was really recognizing, hey, this is a pattern that isn't serving me. And after I had left Apple, I actually took a few months off before I even took this role. And it was really the first time I dug into things like personal development, journaling. It was the first coach I had worked with was during that time. And because I actually thought I was going to leave the tech industry entirely.
Mm.
I was ready to just walk away, say, I'm done with this. But I really ended up realizing that no, I just wanted to work somewhere where it wasn't, inclusion wasn't lip service.
Mm.
And we were really building technology that fulfilled the needs of our diverse world.
Well, and that's interesting because I just was making myself a note there because like I do a lot of work in the tech industry and I've seen a lot of women over the last, 15, 18 months exiting.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is it with this unsaid expectation that where's that coming from? I guess is really what I'm looking for because I'm seeing more people making the changes and leaving or moving into different industry altogether. So where do you think that comes from?
So I think right now we're at a really critical point in time. So even prior, right? One of the things I gave lots of talks on was the fact that over 50% of women leave the tech industry by the age of 35. Like that's research that's been around for over around 10 years at this point. And I think right now though it's getting worse
Hmm.
because the tech industry was going up and to the right. We were really focused on inclusion. There was all these women's initiatives that were going on. And, I don't want to get into politics, but given the political climate in the United States, a lot of that has been cut. And along with that, and the fact that the economy has been shifting, and honestly, a lot of companies overhired during the COVID pandemic and are now using AI as an excuse to let go of people,
Okay.
and are also using AI as an excuse of, well, now you just need to be hustling more. So there's this concept called 996, which is you work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. And it is being touted as your dedication. You're dedicated if you do 996 and you're hustling your way to success. I mean, it's actually interesting. They were looking at internet usage in San Francisco for business applications, and they actually have started seeing an uptick in Saturdays of weekend usage in internet apps. And so I think it's all of these compounding things. We're working in an industry that is now basically saying we don't think there's a problem with women and we don't need to support you. We were already leaving the tech industry early because of bias and unfair treatment. That actually is the number one reason. I think a lot of people think, oh, at 35, women are starting to have families. That's why they're exiting. And while some people are leaving because they want to have families, the top reason is actually the unfair treatment and the lack of inclusion. And then compound that with the current economic climate and the hustle culture. I think there's lots of things that are compounding in the current time and place in the tech industry.
So it sounds like the storm is building.
Yes.
So how does somebody get off of that hamster wheel or off of that sinking ship? Because there's only so long you can sustain that type of, 996. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. So how do you start to step away from that or navigate it even? Like, because some people don't want to leave it because there's a fear of what if I don't find something else? right? So what are some steps you can take to change that or navigate it?
So there's a few things, and I really tell people, I'm not saying go check out of the tech industry. I'm not even saying like leave your job. It's first with an acknowledgement of we define success in this industry as your career going up and to the right, getting more pay, more promotion. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if that is what you desire, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I help lots of people get promoted. And at the same time, tied to that is almost this unexpected happiness comes at the end when you retire. And so what I really try to help people focus on is, what is success holistically for you? Like, your career should be enabling the life that you want, not the other way around. And again, I'm not saying like quit your job tomorrow, but what are some of the small steps that you can be taking? First, it's acknowledging where you want to be. What do you want your life to look like? How do you define success in your own terms? And often, especially for a lot of women, that comes with defining our self-worth. Because especially in the tech industry, a lot of our ego is tied to what we do, what our title is, like our success metrics of all of these things we have accomplished. And if we feel like we're stepping outside that normal pattern, it can be a really big ego hit. I mean, I'll be honest, like when I left my VP role and started coaching, I'm like, okay, but I can't say I'm a VP anymore. And I was like, and it was funny. My business coach, she's like, that experience didn't just magically disappear because you are now doing something else. And it's a reminder I have to give myself. So first, it's really looking at holistically, what do you want to look at? And what are some of the small steps that you can start taking to get there? It's also looking at, where are you working right now? What are some of the challenges that you're running into? Are you in a workplace that is doubling down on this hustle culture? And if they are, can you set boundaries? And if not, can you start looking for other places to work and look at what are other options? Because while this is a narrative and a trend that is happening, it also doesn't mean that every single place is doubling down on creating a hustle culture.
Right.
And I do believe, like, every time we've gone to one extreme or the other, there's going to be a backlash against this. I mean, productivity research from the East has proven that this is not how you actually make high performing teams and improve productivity. So at some point, I truly do believe there's also going to be a backlash. And then the other thing I tell people is, there's a difference between buying into the narrative and doing good work. And so you can set boundaries. One of the stories I used to tell when I was at Tile was I did Pilates twice a week for an hour, even with like my crazy VP of engineering schedule where I was double and triple booked. Everybody knew you did not book over Jossie's Pilates because I would not go to your meeting. Like, it just was non-negotiable. And I remember I had one of my engineers come to me recently after he had joined, and we were talking about this, and he said to me, he's like, oh, well, Jossie, you can do that because you're the VP. And I told him, I was like, no, I empower you to do that as well. And I'm not saying like block off your entire calendar or do it in the middle of a crucial team meeting, right? There are exceptions that we need to account for because we're a workplace, but set aside time for yourself, put it in your calendar. And if somebody harasses you about it, come to me. Like, I will back up the team. And I mean, I share this story publicly in all hands meetings because I did believe it was important for us to set boundaries, because I truly believe, like, if we can work when we are most effective and we can create that life that we want, then we will actually produce our best work.
Yeah. 100%.
And also in our current day and age, when tech companies are kind of saying people are replaceable cogs, this belief that we have to be dedicating our whole lives to them, well, we don't have to be doing that, right? We don't have to, we can still do good work without saying we're going to sacrifice everything. And I think we get sold this narrative that no, if you're fully dedicated, that's what that really means. And it's like, no, I can do great work and not be a slave to a company.
Well, I think those are very important points that you're highlighting, because often it is a trend. And I love how you frame that. And when you were saying that, where my mind went to was the quiet quitting. There's a whole trend also about 4-day work weeks. And there's a lot of science behind why that is so much more productive, or working from home. Like, we go through these phases, right? And oftentimes it does come down to control and narrative of the organization, or even the person who's running the organization. And so for me, I go back to, what are my values, right? You talked about ego. I look at it from a value perspective, right? Work is very important to me, but purposeful, meaningful work is what's most important to me, not just ticking a box and saying, oh yes, I did this, I accomplished that. So I think there's a lot of richness that goes into what you were just saying. And it's hard when you're sitting in it, right? When you've got a mortgage, or you've got a couple of kids that you're trying to raise or put through university, and so it is really getting in alignment with what it is that you need to be successful, how you define that, and is this mechanism, corporation role, giving you what you need to be successful. And I think sometimes we do think they own us to a degree. And we've all been guilty of that at some point in time in our careers. And what you said earlier, it's not about saying quit your job. That is absolutely not it. That's not even realistic. But you can reframe how you look at that role. You can reframe how you participate in those particular situations, the norms that we believe, because sometimes it's not even we believe it, right? Like, sometimes we think, oh, we have to work 24/7, but that's not actually the mandate coming down from the very top. But we presume it, and you've made that clear when you first started talking, that it was sort of a unspoken expectation. So I think part of that is making that visible and asking the question, so you know what the real expectations are.
Yeah, and tied to that, right? I'm so with you. Like, I'm very passionate about what I do on a day-to-day basis, and I want to feel productive, right? From a values perspective. Like, I want to feel like I am making a difference. I am making an impact. And one of the conversations that I've been having with a number of folks, but actually both men and women, is that there are also periods of your career that can be what I've been calling like paycheck seasons. And again, this doesn't mean you're quitting. You can still be doing good work, but maybe making that valuable impact is not happening during the job, and you're finding that fulfillment outside of it. And because again, I was just talking to somebody, she's like, I've been at this company for 20 years. I have a daughter who wants to go to med school and I want to help pay for that. She's like, I'm not in a position to be leaving a stable income right now, but I'm not feeling fulfilled. And I said, okay, I'm not saying step away, but can you energetically allow for the fact that maybe right now this isn't where you're going to find your fulfillment, and focus on the steps it's going to take to get you to the place where you will find your fulfillment, either in a different role at your current company or maybe somewhere else in the future, or something right now. Maybe you decide like, hey, I need to stick this out for another 5 years and I'm finding my fulfillment through something I do outside of work.
Yeah. Well, and that's the really important comment that you're making, because we see this actually a lot with men. They wake up one day and they're retired, and then they go, oh, now what? And women are a little bit, I think, better at finding things outside, like hobbies and interests. And so when the retirement comes, then it's like this shock to the system. And I'm not saying just all men. I mean, women find that too. And so it is important to be looking at what fulfills you and how do you get there. It's that old saying, like, do you live to work or work to live?
Right.
Right. And so distinguishing between both, like, what does that mean for you?
And again, looking at success holistically is not just, I am successful because I got to this career accomplishment or goal.
Yeah. Well, so when you said that earlier, where my head went to was back in my past when I left one of the roles that I had. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is my identity? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a shock to the system because
Yes.
you become so linked to the role that you're playing or working in that you forget about all the other roles that make up who you are. Right. And at the core of all of that is you.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is it about you? And I think that's something really important to practice now before you make that distinction to leave.
Absolutely. That importance about defining who you are is actually really the focus of what I've been calling like this human-centric leadership, which I believe is crucial in the AI world today that is going to transform things. I don't believe we're at the place where AI is going to replace every single job. I'm actually a little of a AI. I love AI and I use it every single day. And at the same time, I'm a bit pessimistic on this like trajectory of where AI is going to take us. Like, I don't think it's going to magically replace every job in the next few years. So I'm a little conservative on the growth numbers there. And at the same time, I think it's that human centric part that is so crucial. Really understanding things like judgment under ambiguity, right? How to deal with uncertainty. And we're certainly living through a lot of
Most
uncertainty
definitely.
right now, right? Adaptability, empathy, right? How often do you read something that you can tell was AI written and was just flat? Right? There's no emotion behind it. And human trust, right? These are the qualities of leadership that I think are going to become even more important as AI keeps transforming our world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, trust happens to be one of my favorite topics. You can see in all aspects what happens when trust is no longer there,
Yes.
whether it's from an institution, the systems, specific people. Like trust has the ability to cripple our
Mm-hmm.
world. And it will cripple organizations if that trust is not there. And so I do agree with you that leaders, they really have to pay close attention to, is trust being built or is it being eroded? Right?
Yeah.
Like, what are the parameters of trust? And how do we define or decide who or what we're going to trust? Right. And, now there's so much, especially like in media, which is where we've always gotten our information. Now people are like, oh, I don't believe that. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
guilty. I'll say, oh, that's not real. Or maybe a little bit of it is, but not all of it. And so there's this distrust that's happening in so many aspects of our lives. And so, working in a company, leaders have to be even more diligent with how they build trust, up, down, sideways, right? And internally versus externally. So, what other leadership qualities do you think that we need to double down on from a human perspective?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, I think that judgment, like really learning to navigate ambiguity, right? Being able to have that judgment piece is crucial because it's not going to know. Like, one of the examples I give is it's not going to see that the product development team keeps building features that end up having some legal compliance implication, right? And if they're the legal compliance person, they can maybe go have that conversation with the product team and say, like, hey, how can we get into your process to ensure you're thinking about this ahead of time instead of having a compliance issue show up? That this is actually a real example I've seen somebody face, right? And an AI, we're nowhere close to an AI being able to connect the dots. So really that judgment piece is crucial. Adaptability. I've always said that the best engineers and the best engineering leaders are adaptable because technology keeps shifting. I joked that the stuff I worked on 25 years ago when I started doing this, like, is laughable if I talk about like the sort of features I was building, and we take it for granted. And there was like entire companies building things that are like little tiny features today. And I think that mindset of adaptability and always continuously learning is now going to be crucial for all leaders. And that is something, and I think good leaders always believed that they were learning, but I think it is definitely something we need to be doubling down on.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
And then strategic influence. Right now, organizations are starting to get a little flatter. And with AI, people are also having managers manage more people. And so being able to influence folks outside of your management chain, and, in the tech space, it often ends up being translating technical reality into business strategy, and being able to do that strategic influence piece, I think, is going to be crucial. And then we talked about people development too a little bit, right? Which is, and I think right now we're actually seeing a backlash in investing in people, but
100%.
I actually think leaders who are investing in their people are realizing they need to support their team members in shifting to learning how to leverage AI effectively, right? Because I think so many corporations right now are just looking at some measure of how much AI is being used, but it's not actually turning into productivity or ROI. And over the long term, the leaders that help enable their teams do this successfully in a way where people are learning to focus more on outcomes instead of the specific tasks of their day to day, that's going to lead to success. And obviously we started talking about trust, and yeah, I think trust is even more crucial in a world where there is so much distrust. And I often work with early stage founders, folks who this is in some cases maybe their first leadership role, or maybe they've managed like one or two people, but they've never led like a whole organization. And I think the thing that they often don't realize is that it's the little things that can make or break trust. It's are you showing up to the meetings that you schedule on time? It's if you say you're going to do something, do you generally do it, or do people have to keep harassing you to get things done, right? And again, we're human. I'm not saying you have to be perfect 100% of the time, but if you have a pattern of almost always canceling on somebody's one-on-one last minute, or rescheduling it last minute, or not showing up, that is going to tell the other person that you don't value them. And that is going to erode trust.
Yes, big time and quickly. Yes. It's funny, when you were talking, Jossie, a couple of things went through my head, and just bear with me for a second, because where I went when you were talking about AI and how people are leaning in on AI to improve productivity, all these things, but they're missing elements of that. And I don't know why my head went here, but my head went to silos in organizations, right? And so the silos are what destroy companies. And so that trust and connection become even more important from a leadership quality, the human qualities, right? Because you're not going to have that with an AI. You can have key information, key data coming out of that, but it's how you put that together. How do you connect the dots of how it impacts the people that you work with, or the customer that you're serving, whatever that is. But that just really, it just struck me so much, because I've seen it in so many organizations where people don't realize it's like a bicycle wheel, right? Each team is a spoke of that wheel. And when one is not engaged in the wheel, things don't run smoothly. And so that becomes really important, that we're connecting everyone into the same view, and that trust has to be there to know you're going to do your part and I'm going to do my part.
Right. Even if the day-to-day things underneath change because of AI, the fundamental outcomes that we own aren't changing. And that's one of the things, especially engineers right now, we're going through some of the biggest transformations because AI is literally coming after our jobs. And I tell people all these companies are still hiring software engineers. Why? Because the job is changing in what we do on a day-to-day basis, but the fundamental of what we are doing, which is building tools, building products, building technology, that outcome is still there. We still need to be building something that somebody is going to use in some way, shape, or form, or performing some service, right? And the more that we can really tie and focus on, am I delivering the outcomes that I was hired to deliver? And often when you're focusing on outcomes, very similar to what you're saying, you can't just stay in your little silo. That is a coordination effort amongst different people in the company.
Yeah. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. That one really strikes me because I think about when I'm in working with teams
Mm-hmm.
and we're working on leadership development. Like, I think it's one of those things that is just invisible to people. They just don't see how the disconnect creates the silos or the lack of harmony or the lack of bringing it to the finish line, quite frankly. And which leads me to my next question, which is when you think about some of those invisible loads or invisible pressures that were on you and that you were carrying, what were some of the ones that you never talked about, but you knew it was a thread that was happening throughout the organization?
Yeah. And so, I think for me personally, imposter syndrome was a big thing. And I do talk about it now because I want especially other women to see you can be successful in your career and still have had periods of imposter syndrome.
Absolutely.
Right. And success doesn't mean, I think, especially in the world of Instagram, and there's this perfect world of,
Mm.
everyone's LinkedIn posts are super successful, right? And I like talking about the fact that, like, no, there were times that kind of sucked in my career when it looked like from the outside I was doing great, and inside I was feeling like a complete fraud, right? And I also made some mistakes. I can look back in my career, especially when I was leading teams early, and I can think about times when I was like, oof, I did not have the difficult conversation I should have. And that really got me in trouble. And so I think talking about the fact that we're all humans, I truly believe leadership is a journey that you're never going to go off the learning of. You're always going to be able to become a better leader. And leaders who have that mindset are the best ones because they, again, are willing to double down on those things. I think
Love
for
that.
women, the other one is the double standard between assertiveness and likability,
Mm.
right? And competence, right? When I was leading a team at American Express, I was called feisty in the middle of a meeting for being direct and standing up for my team. And yet I constantly felt like I had to prove myself in rooms where I was often the only one in the room. And yet the more assertive I was, the less I was generally liked. And then when I tried to be nice, I was considered less competent. And there's a real double standard there and a double bind that women face.
Yeah. The double bind is very real, no question.
Yeah.
And it's a tough one to navigate
Yes.
because it's all of the things you just said, on top of all the other invisible things that are going on inside of us, whether it's, you're a mom and you're worried about your kid that day, or you're caring for an elderly parent, or there's all of these other pressures. And I remember one time in one of the roles I was in, our CFO, he booked a meeting with me very end of the day. And I said, sorry, can't make that meeting. I said, I'm happy to have a phone call with you, but I can't make that meeting. And he was like, well, you have to make the meeting. And I was like, no, I have to get home because I have children. And it became this big thing. And I said to
Mm-hmm.
him, you have a wife that's at home raising your kids. She's not working. I am a single working mom and I'm carrying the load. So we can have a phone call and have whatever discussion it is you want to have, or we're not having the conversation, right? And that was a pivotal moment, I think, for us, because it was kind of like, and I said, book a meeting at 3, not a 6, because I'm not going to be here, right? And so that goes back to what you're saying earlier, just about, you have to find your boundaries. You have to find what works for you, because that was non-negotiable for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned caregiving, right? Because that was actually the next invisible pressure that I was going to talk about, is you're carrying everybody else's emotional weight. And it's not just your family, right? Because I do think, especially right now, there's a lot of folks who are taking care of kids and their parents at the same time,
Yes,
right?
I'm one of those. Yes.
And often there was this narrative that was being painted that women can have it all somehow without support. And that actually, I think, was a very negative impact to women, and telling it that ended up making us feel like failures, because we're like, okay, I somehow am not feeling this, again, Instagram perfect life that supposedly is being presented. Often we just think the answer is to keep doing, right? When I had a really hard time. My mom struggled with Alzheimer's for 8 years. During that period, my dad had a lot of mental health issues that I was having to navigate. And then it just got worse after she passed away. And I just kept going, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what strong women do, right? And
that's what we're told.
It's what we're told. And yet, I was just talking to one of my friends whose mom recently passed away. And I said to her, I was like, look, I know you're doing all these things that you're navigating right now. And like, yes, you need to do that and be strong. But I was like, also give yourself the time to grieve, because it took me 8 years. Like 8 years later, after my mom passed away, I ended up breaking down crying for a week at my best friend's house. And it was funny because I said that was one of the best trips I'd ever taken in my life, despite the fact that I spent all of it crying, or a lot of it crying. I share that again because it's like, it shouldn't take people 8 years to then go process their grief. But I just kept going. I just kept going and going and going. And I just thought I was okay. I was like, I dealt with this. It was fine. I dealt with it. And no, but then when I really let myself process my emotions, that's really when it hit me. And it's also when I was then able to truly step into who I really wanted to be too. Was allowing myself to feel that grief was an important part of realizing, okay, emotions are crucial. Like, they're signals. Like, we can't just ignore them. Like, can't let the logical brain run my life.
Please don't. No, and I think that's such a good message for us to wrap up on, because, I don't know if our audience, if you're familiar with Gabor Mate, but he talks about how the body keeps score. And what Jossie just shared, we're seeing that more and more in women, in the rise in autoimmune disease, because we do just keep going and we keep holding on, or the load is so heavy and we think we have to do it all alone.
Yeah.
And you're not alone. And, like, you've got people that are here in your network. Maybe I'm not directly in your network, but if if this is a situation where you need to talk to somebody about that, like, reach out to somebody and have that conversation. Super important. And know that we've all been there. And Jossie, thank you for sharing that. I think that's very brave of you, number one. And number two, very important for our audience to hear, because sometimes on the surface, we do look like we have it all together, but inside we may be crumbling. And so you never know where somebody is at in their life. So Jossie, I'm going to wrap us up here, but where can people find you? Because, we've opened Pandora's box. So if they have more questions, or they want to reach out and have a conversation with you, where would be the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, so the best place to connect with me is follow me on LinkedIn. I'll send you my LinkedIn handle and URL. And so feel free to shoot me a DM. I love chatting with both women in tech leadership and engineering leaders, and honestly anybody who resonates with this. And I'm always happy to hop on a call and see how I could help you navigate your next step in your leadership journey. And I want to reinforce what you had just said about community, right? I think that is such a crucial piece. And as women, especially when we're in male-dominated industries like tech, we can often feel isolated and alone. And I would say the biggest thing that made an impact in my career after I left Apple and I kind of hit that low point in my career was realizing that I needed to focus on building my network. And that is what has really helped me thrive in my career.
Nice. Love that. And I would echo that. LinkedIn is a very important tool to utilize to build your community and your support system, and just, get connecting people, and not from a transactional perspective.
Yeah. I had a young engineer reach out to me yesterday on LinkedIn, and she said she had seen a recent post of mine, and she just wanted to say, she said, I love what you're doing. I just wanted to say thank you. And it's people like that who I'm like, I'm happy to hop on a call or have a conversation because they're building real connection. So I think sometimes people think like, they get in their heads about what networking means. It just means reaching out and saying, hey, you shared something insightful. And people love talking about themselves. I always tell people like, just say like, hey, this part of your career was impressive. Thank you. Right. And if you can add value, that's even better, right? I saw this article that I thought you might find interesting. And so I like leaving those little tidbits because I think people overemphasize either it should be transactional or then they obsess about what they should say for 30 minutes. Yes. And neither is the right approach.
You'll still be stuck next year if you're thinking that way.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Jossie, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you here, and I'm really grateful that you've shared, bits of your journey. And I think what you said earlier about imposter syndrome, you may have bits or pieces of your life where that shows up, and that's normal. Right? It's more about how you navigate it. So audience, thank you for joining us today. We're really grateful that you're here. And please do visit Women in Leadership Empowered. Take our free leadership quiz. Let me know what you think of that leadership quiz. Did it give you any insight as to where you may be able to be, I can't even talk, where you might be able to enhance aspects of your leadership. So we thank you again for being here, and we'll see you on the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thank you. Jossie, thanks again for being here. Likewise, thanks. Thank you for joining us for WIL Talk, sponsored by Women in Leadership Empowered. To learn more about our programs, please visit www.willempowered.com. We look forward to seeing you in our community.